All right, what is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to our official build video of the MK6 GTD's engine. We're finally gonna be slapping all of our performance parts into our freshly machined block. We've got our lovely assistant Mo helping us today. He's been in a couple of our other videos and he is a fam favorite. This is probably gonna be one big long video because we're gonna do it kind of all in one shot. I got my last couple parts today actually. The most important bit, big old head gasket for this bad boy, but as I said in the last video that you saw before this, we did a whole breakdown on the cost of everything to build this whole engine, and let's pray to God this thing doesn't blow up. We're gonna be very, very careful to put everything together properly. We've gone ahead and acquired ourselves a nice little snap-on digital torque wrench so that we can do everything to actual specs, unlike all my other videos where everything's good and tight. And it's just kind of about piecing the Lego back together. So without babbling on too much further, we're gonna start with doing obviously our main bearing kit. I don't even know, I'm not even gonna try to pronounce the company that made these, but these are from Darkside, like all my other bits. And then we're gonna slap the crankshaft, which is hiding down in this little bit over here, into the engine. And we're gonna start putting it together. So gonna pull that out. We're gonna show you guys, throw some bearings in and just go through the whole build process. So let's get her going. We've got all of our caps and everything are all loose right now, so we're just gonna kind of pull them off in a second. I've cleaned the crank, which is kind of just over here, and we're just not gonna look at that right now because this is kind of a more important part to this. You have one bearing like this that has the hole for the oil channel. I'll hand that off to Mo here because I have to pull a bunch of the other bearings out really quickly. The normal bearing that doesn't have the oil channel in it, and so this is the one that goes on basically the bottom side of the engine. So the bearing with the oil hole goes on the block side instead of, I'm gonna call it like the free side, which is just like the cap side, I guess. And no assembly lube on the bearing to the block, but we are going to be using assembly lube on the bearing to the crankshaft. So there, like that. Super easy. And then we're just gonna do this once just to show you guys. So I'm gonna take okay, so obviously also with the bearing caps, that's another important bit. So this is the front of the engine block. So we're using this side. This is like your oil cooler and your water pump and everything. So if you're looking at your main caps, the number is gonna be on the back side of the engine, and then the C is gonna be on the front side. So we're gonna grab the other bearing, and then we're gonna take the new bearing, and obviously it does have the little guide pin. Just gonna slap that. And it shouldn't take much force at all to get the bearing in there, but it obviously takes a little bit. And you just give it a little push, and there we go, and it should be level. And then essentially it just kind of goes back in. So I'm not gonna bolt everything up. I'm just gonna get all of the everything kind of lined up and ready to go back together, and I'm just gonna do all the bearings all at once. So we'll come back once all the bearings are ready, and then we'll drop the crank in. Okay, so if it'll focus, we got the new bearings in, but now we're gonna use the Ultra Slick assembly lube, and I'm gonna get Mo to hold the camera while I lube everything up.
Ultra Slick.
Ultra Slick. Because we're gonna have to pull all the bolts out once again, and we're just gonna kind of slap some, just a little bit kind of on everything, and then we're gonna kind of like rub it in. This stuff does get everywhere, and it's not really a big deal if it gets all over the place, because the idea is you basically just want to cover it on all of the bearing surfaces so that when you don't have oil pressure in the engine to begin with, and everything kind of has something to glide around on, if you know what I mean. Okay, so we're gonna slap the crankshaft in now. So if you're following this as a build guide for the CJAA, the gear side goes to the back of the engine, and now it should, in theory, spin. So we're gonna lube up the top side of our main bearings as well on the crank, just to kind of add an additional bit of lubrication, because we're gonna have to put the main bearing caps on in a second. I gotta put the sputter bearings in, or not the sputter bearings, the thrust bearings. So with crankshafts, and he'll know this very well because this man owns an Evo 8, crank walk is a thing. So that's when your crank moves like basically forward and back inside your engine. And you have these little bad boys here. Mo, if you want to come in closer a sec. You got these guys. So these are your thrust washers, and these basically prevent that. So inside this little guy here, you just basically put these in like this. And then on the main cap force, the third one, it just kind of slips in like that.
This thing's about like 35 pounds.
So we'll let Adrian put the crankshaft back in now. And so you see now the crank can't move forward and back because we have the thrust washers on the bottom. So now we're going to put the thrust washers in on the middle cap. That guy in like that. Boom. Super simple. Then I'm just gonna put those guys in. And now we're gonna lube up the rest of them and just one by one put the rest of the bearings on, and then we'll put the bolts. It's star pattern, so 65 Newton meters plus 95, so we're gonna go to 60. Well, we're gonna get them kind of like, we'll get them snug until we start getting a torque reading. So we're gonna go 65. Engine rolls away. And on that note, we should have, yay, a fully free spinning crank, all lubed up, main caps, bearings are in. Step one done. So crankshaft is secured. Next, obviously, we're gonna do the pistons, new pistons to our new rods. So if you come on over here, I've already gone ahead and disassembled one of these. So this is our old factory pistons. We're gonna be reusing our factory pistons, and we're just gonna be replacing our rods. So for those of you that haven't watched my other video, these are FCP Engineering high performance steel connecting rods. I don't think they're any lighter than the stock ones. They might be a couple grams lighter. Yeah, like maybe just a little bit. Reusing factory wrist pins, putting new wrist pin retainers in it. Obviously new piston rings are gonna be going in. We have Mahle piston rings, and we're gonna be putting those in. So we'll do that now. We're gonna do 4. We've got the factory pistons and rods over here, so we're gonna disassemble all those guys. And I'll show you how to take the wrist pins out of those and get it all separated. We'll clean them up, and then we'll put them on the new rods, put the bearings on, and then slap them in the motor. So let's jump over and do that now. I've cleaned up the pistons basically as much as I really need to, just so that there isn't really anything sticking out on them. These are used pistons with 120,000 kilometers on them, but they still are in good condition. The wrist pin bearings are still good. Pistons themselves are in really good condition, and they cleaned up fairly decent. You can see the injector spray pattern on the top of them. And we're gonna go ahead and put the piston rings in, and I'm gonna show you guys how to do that. Obviously do this at your own risk. Got this guy right here. There's 3 rings. Obviously you have the 2 upper rings, and then you have the oil control ring on the bottom. And we're using Mahle rings. I don't think there's a part number on here. Actually, I guess there is. That's the part number we're using for the CJAA 2-liter. Just gonna crack this guy open. And Mahle's awesome, or Mahle, or however you wanna say it, because they label their rings. A, B, and C. So obviously start with A because you want to put the lowest ring on first. So that is the oil control ring. Looks like this. It's got a little spring on the inside. So what I do with these is I just pull the spring out, because you can actually expand the spring a little bit. So if you look at it over here, there's like a bunched up bit, and you can just kind of like pull it apart a little bit, and it makes it bigger or smaller. So we just grab the piston, and I'm not putting them in the orientation for the installation yet. I'm just getting them on the ring, because you're supposed to clock all the rings in a certain or a specific orientation. So here, we just kind of slide that down, get it on the bottom one. Then we're gonna tighten it back up a little bit. We're gonna take our oil control ring. We're going to just stretch it by hand. And see on the back side, like this, it's kind of like it's popping out a little bit. So you just want to be very, very careful that you are expanding the ring enough to get the spring into position. And then you're just going to kind of spiral it around the piston until it catches the whole spring, and then we're good to go. So like I said, not setting the orientation yet, and I'll show you guys what orientation we're going to be using once we go to put the pistons in, because we'll spin the rings before we put the compressor on. So ring number 2, these rings do have top and bottom markings. It's not gonna focus, there we go, on my hand, but that says top right there. So just make sure that's on the top of the piston. And so the second ring, for myself, I can still kind of stretch it by hand, so I don't need to spiral it on there, but that one's pretty easy for me, so I got that on there pretty fast. So the top ring is actually the strongest of the three, so this one I can't really spread out completely. So what I do is I will take the edge of the first one and just kind of like let it get caught on there, and then you just kind of spiral it down around the back side, and then see once it's down in the back and it's made its way around the lip of the whole piston, I just can click it right down and we're good to go. So all three rings are in. I've already done the other 4 pistons as well. Biggest thing is just make sure you get them on there without bending them or stretching them, and then set them to the correct orientation, which I will show you in a second. But now we can go ahead and re-rod the pistons, put the wrist pins back in, and then put the clips in, and then those are good to be installed, and we'll throw the pistons in the engine. The pistons themselves have no specific direction. The only difference is one side has the, I'm assuming, batch number written on them. First step, obviously, with doing the guide pins and everything is making sure everything's super clean and kind of just basically good to go. So we've already cleaned off all of our guide pins. So we can slide this guy in here. All right, so that's one in, and then I just kind of have to put the retaining clip back. Kind of bear with me here, but essentially we're just gonna take kind of the corner, and you have this little indent on this side right here, this little hole, and I just kind of tuck it in, and then I push the clip with my fingers. And then you get the back side in, and then I was able to just take like an Allen key and just kind of like push it, or push the edge like that, click, and we're in. And then that's the wrist pin in. And then I have to figure out the orientation for the piston rings, like I was telling you guys earlier. So I'll figure that out in a second, and then we should be good to slap the bearings on and then put those guys in the engine. So we'll do that in a second. I'm just gonna do that to the rest of the pistons, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so I'm gonna show you guys the piston orientation of the rings real quick. That's the passenger side of the engine, that's the driver's side of the engine. So we're gonna put ring number 1 on the top with the gap towards the passenger side, ring number 2 towards the driver's side, and then oil separation ring is going to be to the rear. Just rotate that. So now we're going to put the piston in the cylinder. All right, Jacob, hammer away. Yep.
Yep.
Okay, hold on one sec. Good. And I'm not torquing bolts on the bottom for you guys that can't see me down here. I'm just screwing in the caps. And then once all 4 are in, we'll flip the engine over and do it up top. All right, so now that we've got the rods, bearings, and everything in the engine, we got it spun back over, and we're gonna go ahead and torque everything up. So it's 22 foot-pounds plus 90 degrees for these guys. So I've just kind of got them I thought I had them finger tight. So these are ARP bolts, so we're gonna go ahead and lubricate them as per the specification. That's way too much. Threads and mating surfaces, both. So I'll just show you guys these 2, and then I will do the other ones. So I'm just gonna spin these back in by hand real quick. So 22 foot-pounds, and then plus 90. All right, then we'll do a good angle. So now we gotta do 90. So we'll do 45. All right. Beauty. I did do one more thing since recording the last little bit. So on the CJAAs, they have this big, huge thing on the bottom of the motor underneath the crankshaft, and that's actually the mechanical oil pump. So it's just a gear-driven oil pump that cycles the oil through the engine, and that just bolts right on there. There's nothing really crazy to that I need to show you guys on how to do it. But we now are basically at the point where we need to set this engine to top dead center so that we can start hooking up all the timing components, like the water pump and whatnot. Cams to crank timing obviously is the most important. And then I'm actually waiting for a buddy to come over because we have to pull the engine off the stand in order to get in here and set up the rear main seal, which is right here. So this is our new rear main seal. I'm using the original sensor for the, I can't remember what the gear does on here, but it's basically like it's a sending signal for engine timing and like fueling and that kind of stuff. We have to get it off the stand in order to get access to that part of the engine. So I'm waiting for him to show up, but while we're waiting, we're gonna go ahead and start screwing around with the timing components and get the, first off, the water pump on, and put a new bolt in the crank gear here because I did reuse the bolt just to be able to spin the motor over for the time being. And then basically get some gaskets set up for the oil cooler and whatnot. But yeah, so we'll do that. We've been cleaning the head a little bit, just kind of going at it with like using a razor just to get the rest of the gasket material off the outside, kind of clean it up. Still a little bit more work to do, but it did look a lot worse when I first started. So it's getting there. No real high spots on anything. Like this head hasn't been machined. It won't be getting machined because we're basically out of time at this point. And the clearances, if we do machine it, are going to be so far out that it's just going to run the risk of having valve contact at some point. But yeah, nothing really of concern. The head looks really good. It's flat, but it's just, yeah, the leftover little bit of material on here. We're using this really good valve cleaner that I've used before, clean off carbon and that kind of thing. It's a CRC intake valve cleaner. You're supposed to spray it into a running engine, but I've never done that. I actually just spray it into my intake track and on other carbon ridden parts. So yeah, let's, I'll put you guys on the tripod and we will get to putting some more stuff on the motor. Yeah, transmissions. Yeah, we good. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, he done. You think brake cleaner?
Watch out.
Make sure you lube it up, folks.
Yep.
Lube it up for easy entry.
Get it?
What's wrong with you?
Yeah, I'm watching you lube up your
Nuts.
Yeah, I guess. No, what do you mean? The people gotta know. You gotta lube your nuts. You have to, or else they won't slide into the long head studs. Double piston the nuts, eh?
Yep.
It's pretty good.
Kaboof on nitrous, probably.
I mean,
So we're gonna go ahead and torque the head bolts down, or the nuts, or studs, or whatever you want to call them. All the bolts installed, so we're gonna follow the torque pattern recommended by APR. So first pass is 80 foot-pounds, second pass is 100, and then the third pass is 120. So we're gonna follow the L-ring pattern here. So it's pretty simple if you've done head bolts before. It's inside, outside kind of thing, alternating. So fire up the torque wrench real quick, so I'll just follow the torque sequence once through, and then I'll do all 3 passes, but I won't really show it all. So there's 80. All right, so that's the first torque done. I'm gonna go through the pattern again, do 100 and then 125, and then we'll be good to go for the head studs. So I'll be back in a second. All of the head bolts or nuts or studs or whatever you want to call them are all good to go. Torque to 125 foot-pounds. So this head is on the motor, ready to go. We're gonna go ahead and install the cams now. My cam timing is gonna be a little bit difficult to set up because the motor wasn't at top dead center when I took it off and I marked the cams, but the cam gear can only go on one way, so I just have to make sure that both cams are in time with each other, because on the CJAAs, they are independent of each other and they are mesh gear to keep them in time. I'm gonna get the larger cam, which is on the back side of the motor, in place and then set to top dead center for itself. And then I'm gonna go ahead and time the other cam to that. And that'll be a little bit of a difficult task, but so I'm just gonna need a minute here. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the valve cover on, or the cam cover or whatever. So we're using anaerobic gasket sealant, and I've used this in my other videos, but essentially this is like the go-to Volkswagen cam cover sealant. It's an anaerobic sealant. It's pretty expensive stuff. You don't really need a lot of it because where it gets applied is pretty much going to be sandwiched very, very flat. So I'm actually going to take, and we just don't want it to get in the bearing valleys. So less is more in this case. Get the valve cover, or the cam cover. Just gonna put the center bolts in first. Yeah, we was big stupid, bro.
And how long did this take you to figure out?
Once I figured it out, about fucking a minute.
And how many days were you in complete stress and denial of your engine?
Many days.
Would you work on an engine or would you work on a relationship?
Engine. Engines are easier. But yeah, we should, we're pretty much good to go here. There's fucking so many mosquitoes, bro. Why did we open the door?
Oh, mosquito town. I will go close the garage.
All right, so everything's tight. Moment of truth. So I don't know if I talked about this in the video, but the spec for the valve clearance on my motor is like 0.1 mil higher compression. So that means there's more piston protrusion than spec. So this is gonna be a little bit of a higher compression motor, but let's pull the timing lock pins out, and they're all loose. Beautiful. Nice and easy. So to verify that our work is correct, we're taking this guy. Okay, we ready?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I guess I should probably open my intake ports so it's not sucking tape into it.
Moment of truth. Will it spin? Will it blend? Oh! Does it need to do a full rotation? Yeah.
Hell yeah. We're spinning, boys and girls, if there are any. Hell yeah. Nice. Dude, look at how easy this is to turn. Okay, like I'm not gonna toot my own horn. I'm a pretty strong guy, but like, look at this.
Whew.
I wonder if I can do, hold on, let's see if we can do it without the extension on here. Hold on. No, okay, not quite. Not that strong. But hell yeah. Nice. We're just gonna reset it to top dead center here. Back at TDC. I'm just gonna put the timing locks back in. But ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. This is probably gonna be one of the highest horsepower
2-liter CJAA engines not built by a company on anywhere, pretty much. So you're not gonna wanna, yeah. So actually we'll quickly go over some stuff because I'm gonna grab the camera from my boy here. The mechanical stuff for the entire motor is essentially done. So heads on, cams are in, timing belt, oil pump, oil pan, all the goodies mechanically are together. Now, one thing that I'm gonna do a completely separate video on, just because these parts are sponsored and I wanna do a full video on it, that a lot of you kind of were excited about, was the dark side oil cooler. So that's gonna be a completely separate video, but at this point, everything that is gonna go on the motor from this point going forward, aside from the timing cover obviously, is the turbo, which is on the car right now, the upgraded injectors, which is also on the car right now, my intake manifold, we're gonna be doing some custom stuff to that, deleting the intake swirl flaps and some other goodies, and then like I said, the oil cooler and everything is gonna get put on as well. So everything at this point is as far as we can do it before we pull the other motor out of the car, and that's pretty much it. So the CJAA is together, we're ready to rock and roll, and we're hopefully getting ready to make 400 horsepower. And Adrian is here for moral support. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you're cool with the transition over to the wide angle lens, because this is actually, I guess, the first video that I'm using this lens on. If you're new to the channel,
Don't forget to subscribe and comment and like so it helps the algorithm.
precisely what Adrian said. But anyways, guys, peace out. I will see you in the oil cooler or the engine install video. But anyways, peace out.